As the guardians of the United States Constitution, political democracy, individual liberty, and equality of economic opportunity. Question is asking you, in light of the following documents, your knowledge of 1820s and 1830s to what extent do you agree with the Jacksonians' version of themselves, or view of themselves? So what this question is asking you to do is two things. It's asking you to compare and contrast the views. So you have to look at both the pros and cons of the things that Jackson did and what his party wanted to accomplish. But then you got to look at within the scope of three main points. And probably the easiest way to do that is politics, economics, and social developments. That might change. We might work that in. The third main point might be the Constitution, what they did with that. But we'll go through the documents and kind of put these in order. Document A, the Working Man's Declaration. Go ahead and hit pause. When you read through that, kind of gives you, like they talk about in document A, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, and they talk about those rights. The quote towards the end, he starts with political leaders, it is their right, it is their duty to use every constitutional means to reform the abuses of such a government, to provide new guards for future security. Okay, this goes back, document A goes back to the question about Jacksonian Democrats and whether or not they're guardians of the Constitution in certain things. In document A, it is their right, it is their duty to use every constitutional means to reform the abuses of such a government, to provide new guards for future security. That is what Jackson believes he's trying to do, and that's what his party believes he's trying to do. What is it called? Like, what was the idea that the Jacksonians supported about people? What was it they kind of tried to raise up? The idea of man. Common man. Jackson believes he's a big proponent of the common man. That he's trying to help the common man get ahead. And so with document A, that's kind of an example of the guy saying, you know, this is what we want. These are the things that we have to have. It's the government's job to provide them. So if you look at the Jacksonian Democrats, document A is probably going to go with what topic? It is their right, it is their duty to use every constitutional means to reform the abuses of such a government, to provide new guards for their future security. Politics. Politics. Okay, document A is probably going to go with politics. Now, what you have to do is you have to lead in. The way you're going to start off this is going to be probably your first main point. What you would do is start off with political changes that are occurring. Okay, what's happening in the 1820s, the 1830s? It's changing in politics. What do we know that's going to happen? What outside information? What were some of the things that changed with political parties and changed with voting requirements too?
You didn't have to own land.
You only had to be white to vote.
And own property. Well, either own property or pay taxes. Yeah, they changed the laws, a lot more people vote. So they changed voting requirements. In states. What was another thing they did in regards to the election process?
They like used buttons, or like they started to
Okay.
They did.
there more.
Campaigns. Added parades, buttons,
So basically, private.
parties. I mean, they started doing more things to make candidates more interesting. But with the actual selection of the candidates themselves, they moved away from what they called the caucus, and what did they switch to? It's what we still use today.
Primary.
Primaries. They started using primaries where they selected who was going to be their candidate. They started using the primary system. So before you go into things that Jackson did, you kind of start off with what was changing in the era, and then you would go into more detail on the things that Jackson did and how, I'd use that quote next about in document A, it's their right, their duty to use every constitutional means to reform the abuses of such a government and provide new guards for social security, and maybe talk a little bit about what they're saying in that document as far as what are the abuses. But with that, with the Jacksonians in politics, what was one of the things he did that tried to champion the common man, get them more involved in politics? He kind of started this whole process that we still see today.
It's like where you place favorites, basically.
Yeah, where you play favorites, what's it called?
Spoil system.
Spoil system. Spoil system, and it could also be too what they call rotation of office holders. The spoil system or rotation of office holders involves the idea that basically when your people who supported you getting elected should get a position within your government. So you're going to fire the old people and bring in new ones. And so he believed that helped support democracy for a couple of reasons. One, it gave the common man a chance to hold office. He also believed it removed bad office holders. But the other thing is too, when you write this essay, you have to do the pros and cons. So in some cases, it might have put in bad office holders. Okay. With champion the common man, he believed anyone could be taught to do a good job. Didn't have to be an expert, and kind of despised experts. So the spoil system and rotation of office holders is one example of Jackson's idea. I'm going to give you outside information today in a packet about the post office and what he does to the postal system, because some of it's good and some of it's bad, and that's kind of like with the essay, you have to show both sides. Document B, Jackson's veto message. What's the topic of that veto message, or what is the subject of it?
The bank charter?
Huh?
The bank?
Bank. Okay. So document B deals with the subject of the bank. With the bank, where does that fit in? Economics. Yeah, it's going to fit into your economics main point. Okay. The bank is probably one of the bigger issues for Jackson in terms of he's vetoing it. Why? Why does he veto it? What do you think it was? What's the last sentence in that paragraph, in that section said?
It's regretted that the rich and powerful too often bend the act of government to their selfish purposes.
So who does he think it's a tool for?
The rich and powerful.
Yeah. So Jackson's veto of the bank it's based on his belief that the rich and powerful control it. That's kind of his idea, is that these rich and powerful people control it. The other thing is, he talks about how the people of the bank are, some of the stock is held by foreigners, it's held by the rich, they have a monopoly of foreign and domestic exchange. So his opinion of the bank is not very, it's not a good one, okay? So you might use the points about the monopolies, and you might use the the quotes about the rich and powerful, selfish purposes. He sees the bank as that. Now, this is Jackson's idea. The downside is, and we're going to talk about this today, with what he does, his actions create a long-term financial crisis. He moves money, he creates what he calls pet banks, or wildcat banks, or basically like, you put the money in the bank, like a wildcat bank or a pet bank, there's not regulations, there's not federal oversight of these banks, so they can kind of do whatever they want. They can make loans to people who might not have qualified under the Bank of the United States. The Bank of the United States might have told them, look, you just can't have this much money. You can have X amount of dollars, but you're not going to get this much. Well, these pet banks or wildcat banks, they don't have rules, they don't have regulations. They're kind of, that's what wildcat means, it's crazy. So they can do whatever they want. So they loan out all this money, and when they don't get paid back, you know, they go bankrupt too. They basically go under. And so when the federal government takes its deposits out of the bank and puts it in these pet banks, Jackson really undermines the financial system. He will do what's called the bank war. He is determined to destroy the Bank of the United States. He wants to kill it. Those are his words. Now, he believes, and his party believes, they're acting as guardians. Because what are they trying to protect the people from? Who does Jackson believe he's protecting the people from?
The government.
Not necessarily the government.
The rich and powerful.
The rich and the powerful. And this is who he believes is the problem, is the rich and the powerful. Therefore, he sees a bank as a tool of it, so he wants to destroy the bank, he wants to take it away. The problem is when he does that, he puts the money into pet or wildcat banks, creates a financial panic long term that Martin Van Buren has to deal with. In 1839, the economy starts going south. Well, Jackson's on his way out. So Martin Van Buren, when he takes over, has to deal with all these problems. So the bank war is one example of where Jackson tried to do something he thought was good for the people. It's not going to be good. He made it too personal. And that's too where you're going to include information. We'll talk about this today with, Jackson's outside information would be Henry Clay and a guy named they called Nicholas Biddle. Biddle was in charge of the bank, and Clay tried to use the bank as a weapon against Jackson. He was trying to get it as an election issue. But that's going to be outside information, which we'll go over today in class. Document C, Daniel Webster's reply to Jackson's veto message. What's that going to go under?
Economics.
Yeah, economics, because document C is linked to document B. C is Webster's rebuttal of Jackson's actions. So that would be when you're doing the bank topic and you're going into Jackson's reasons for going after it, then you're going to go into like Webster's response and connect that to problems that are caused by Jackson's actions. Like, And then those problems are gonna be like, there was widespread speculation, that widespread speculation in money